So, you want to work in museums. And if you clicked on this video, you've probably realized that it can become a bit challenging to find museum jobs as well as make a successful career in the field. But it doesn't have to be. I've created this complete checklist of everything you can do to set yourself up for success in your next museum job application. And this advice is all coming directly from my experience working in museums, galleries, and nonprofits in both New York City and London. Of course, this video will be broken down into chapters, so feel free to jump around to whatever parts are most relevant to you. And this application checklist, as well as a lot of the advice I'm giving you today, is just a snippet of the ebook I recently published, Your Guide to Working in Museums. So that will be linked below if you want any more advice, and I'll also put my socials down there in case you want to follow and see what I'm up to on a daily basis as a museum professional living in London. But let's dive straight in. I think the most important step, and probably the most overlooked, is doing the basic background research that you need to do to see what jobs exist in museums. When I was just starting to realize that I wanted to work in museums, I only knew of curatorial roles or maybe the kind of front of house staff that you see when you visit a museum. And since that was all I really knew, that's all I thought that you could do in a museum. And I spent many years studying art history and thinking that I wanted to be a curator until I stepped into a museum through an internship and realized how many jobs exist. And whatever job or field you end up going to in museums, it might depend a bit on your educational background, your skills, or your experience, or just your interest as a whole. But I'm just going to lay out some of the options of different departments and job titles that exist in museums so that you have a bit of a flavor of what exists. And if you end up wanting to know even more about other jobs that exist, another recommendation I have is to go on LinkedIn, find whatever museum that you prefer, and look at the people that work there and see what their job descriptions are. This will also give you a sense of how many different jobs there are within one museum. So if you're interested in research, maybe the more typically thought about roles in a museum, you have curatorial, you also have a lot of content creation. So things for the website, things for social media, of course, and really just building out that content through research. This can also include audio guides and wall labels in the museum. If you want to be a bit more creative, there's also a lot of jobs around design, so exhibition design, graphic design, website UX design, all of those bits. There's usually an in-house team for larger museums. You'll also find that there's a lot of jobs in the museum that focus on making the museum money. And I think this is the biggest shock to me before I interned or started working in a museum, is that museums are really just a business. They're trying to make money, get more art, and make more people come through the doors every day. So some roles with this could be around exhibition and ticketing sales, membership sales and analytics, as well as development for the museum, which could be through donors, sponsorships, or gifts given to the museum to help them produce more content, produce more exhibitions. I think it's worth noting here that I have seen a rise in the importance of these jobs in the museum. I think this can partially be due to different government fundings not being available or less support financially for museums, that they're relying more on their business teams to make profit. It can be helpful for you if you're just starting out museums and you're not sure where to go. This is a field that's really important and really valued at the moment. And to quickly go through some other options, if you want to be more involved with the visitor, there's of course a lot of ground staff, so that could be things like operations or security guards, visitor experience, even being in the shop. And all of these you're dealing directly with the visitor. You can also be focused on the visitor's experience, so many museums have research and data teams to better understand the visitor experience and better design systems for them. Another big department in museums is the learning or education teams, and these ones are all about teaching about the collection to the public. So this could be on public tours, this could be designing courses, this could be having school groups in. There's so many different ways that the museum is trying to teach different audiences about their collection. And of course, digital and tech roles are always expanding in museums. There's been a big push recently to digitize our full collections. So there's a lot of even temporary roles where your entire job is just about digitizing the collection to the website. Additionally to that, there's a lot of website roles. There are social media and content roles, as well as analyzing the digital audience through Google Analytics and things like this. And then of course, there are things that just help the museum run smoothly. Internal teams that you probably would see in any business, like finance, legal, HR, receptionists, personal assistants, all of those job descriptions that would be really similar in a different institution, but they also exist in museums. So that was already a lot, but I promise you I missed so many jobs when I just went through all of those. But just to give you a flavor of the sense of jobs that exist in museums and remind you of how broad those can be. And when you're just starting out, you might be better off looking at those jobs that are a bit more niche or a bit less known by everyone, because you might have a bit less competition for your first couple roles. All right, so now that we've explored the different roles that exist in museums, and maybe you have like 2 to 4 in your head that kind of stick out of being of interest to you, or maybe they're a unique blend of some skills that you have. Now we're going to talk about education and experience. For your undergrad degree, it's probably best case scenario that you have some sort of humanities degree. Maybe you studied art history, something with museum studies, something along that line. But I think that this degree matters less than people think. I think what really matters here is showing evidence that you're interested, passionate, and experienced in the sector you want to go into. So this can show up in a lot of different ways. So one is your coursework or your degree. So that's one of it. But then you also have things like clubs or internships, volunteering, and even work experience that you can do while you're in undergrad or afterwards that really make you stand out on your application and show you as a more well-rounded candidate. I think placing so much emphasis onto your undergrad degree as being the one thing you need for a museum job is just not right. And if you're just about to be going into undergrad, or maybe you're currently in undergrad, doing all of these extracurricular type activities like volunteering, interning, etc., this is a great time to just start piling all of that on so you have evidence to put on your CV. And this is one of the few times maybe in your life where you have the freedom, financially and time-wise, to do these kind of lower paid roles. Of course, I wish it was not the case that these roles are underpaid, if paid at all. But it is a system that is kind of still running. So if you are in a place where you can take these internships, or maybe your school offers kind of a stipend to work in different departments or museums, etc. on campus, this is a really great time to just start doing that. And if you have already finished your undergrad degree, don't worry, all hope is not lost, but my advice is kind of the same. So as much as you're able to within your kind of current life situation, I would prioritize making museums or whatever sector specifically, so art, history, make that stand out on your CV. So that might mean volunteering one weekend day a week at your local museum to just slowly start putting more museum things onto your CV, because this is assuming that you didn't do this during undergrad. I think it's really important though to start adding more and more elements to your CV that seem aligned with a job that you want. And working, volunteering in museums is probably your best bet. This is also an added bonus that you also get to see a little behind the scenes look, and before you commit to working in museums, you can test it out and make sure that it's something that you really enjoy before you commit to it. Perhaps the most asked question I get whenever I make content about working in museums is, do I need a master's degree? What should it be in? And do I need a PhD? And my general rule of thumb is it completely depends. So first of all, it depends on what role you want. There's some roles that do need advanced degrees. I think curatorial or maybe scientific conservation, very specialized roles, they're probably going to need quite advanced degrees. However, for pretty much every other role in a museum, and I know this might depend a bit on location, but I would say quite broadly, you should either have about 2 to 3 years of work experience as close to that job description as you can possibly get, or a master's degree in the field. This is something I don't hear people really talking about, especially in the museum world, is that working outside of museums can actually be really beneficial to your career. And I did this myself. So I had a little bit of experience working in museums while I was an undergrad. I studied art history, so I was kind of on that path. But then I shifted and I did my master's in data science, which was a big jump. But after that, I worked in tech for about 2 years, and I was a data scientist. I had a lot of experience with the kind of technical skills required for the role. And then I applied to be a data analyst at an art museum. So I personally think that I was able to get that role because I had shown with that 2 years of work experience that I was qualified to be in that role. And I think this is really applicable with many jobs in museum. From marketing, business roles, even more of like the learning and content creation roles, there are so many different sectors that might be easier to just break into as your first job after education, but then you work there for a year or two and then you can apply those skills directly to the museum. I think it's an important reminder that museums do not like taking risks, okay? They want guaranteed candidates who are going to be good workers with all the skills that they require. And how you can make yourself start to stand out is if you already have those skills and you can demonstrate them very clearly on your CV. So ideally this would be through work or internship experience at least. But if you want to kind of sidestep this and you want to get a job earlier without working in different industries first, that's where a master's degree might be best for you. But again, that's a completely personal decision based on what you want to do and your financial situation as well. I do think it's important just to really reflect on what you want your master's degree to be in. If you are doing it straight after your undergrad, think about your long-term career in museums. I think a lot of people think, I want to work in museums, that's all I really care about, so I'm going to study museum studies, which is completely fair. I think there's many amazing programs for museum studies, but I think you might end up limiting yourself, where if instead you did a master's degree in a bit more specialized field, you could really open doors and create a really unique niche for yourself. Another thing I want to say here in the experience section is that if you notice that there's a certain skill or expertise that keeps popping up in the job descriptions that you do not possess, use online courses, certificates, and even creating your own projects to your advantage. This can help your CV stand out, of course, and also it's just another way of demonstrating that you already have the skills that they're looking for. Okay, so we've already covered so much, but now I really want to dive into my top tips for when you're actually applying to jobs and how to network to get those opportunities. I think part of the reason that there seems like there is not any museum jobs is because they will literally be posted for a week or two before they're closed. I saw this firsthand, so I know it definitely happens. Museums need to fill roles quite quickly, so if you're not already ready to be looking for them and know where to look, you're literally just gonna miss it. So a couple things you can do, I would bookmark all of the career pages for all the museums that you're interested in working for, and then just schedule in a time maybe once a week where you, every Monday morning, you just go check their pages, see if anything new has popped up. I also always recommend signing up for the communications that are offered by the museums you're interested in. So that could be signing up for their newsletter, follow them on social media, and follow them on LinkedIn. Because you never know where job opportunities are going to pop up. I've seen many arts organizations, particularly smaller ones, where they will literally just post a job opportunity on their story. So that's disappearing in 24 hours. Which, I mean, I'm not saying that to stress you out and that you have to be constantly checking all these things, but just a reminder that you should kind of be consuming a lot of content by the museums that you're interested in. And this has two benefits. Of course, first, you might see job opportunities when they first popped up. You can be an early applicant and make sure you get an application in on time. But also you're staying up to date with what they're producing, the content they're creating, and exhibitions that they have on. So, this is the world you want to be in. You're starting to put yourself into that world. And then down the road, when you inevitably have an interview with them, you already know what they've had going on. You can ask them about the past exhibition, the past programming. You know the world that they're already existing in. And like I said, definitely follow them on LinkedIn. You can also create job alerts on LinkedIn for specific job titles or locations. So I would recommend doing that as well. This is all just to set it up so it's a bit automated. I don't want you to have to be checking all of these things every second of every day because that just gets insanely stressful. But if you can automate these things so that you just get a notification when it does pop up, you're already set. We're talking about LinkedIn. I know it's not everyone's favorite platform. It's definitely not my favorite platform, but just use it to your advantage. At least make sure you have the kind of basic information filled out, a profile picture, a description, a cover photo, and your overview of your education and experience. I do have a lot more detailed tips on this in my ebook if you're interested in kind of revamping your LinkedIn for the museum world. And like I said before, your goal when you're applying to jobs is really just to start immersing yourself into that world. So another thing you can do is go through LinkedIn and follow any kind of industry leader voices in your local area. So to do this, you might just go to a major museum in your city, see if there's anyone that works there that has a similar role as you or is quite, senior in the museum that you can follow on LinkedIn, because I've noticed that these type of people are the ones that will share opportunities from across the sector. The thing you can do here is when you're kind of doing this stalking on who is working at your local museums, click on a couple bios and see what they've done to get themselves into that role. And I think this can be particularly useful for people that are younger in their career, maybe similar position as you, and see what they did to get them to where they are now. What can you learn from it, and what can you maybe be different than that you think would make you really stand out as an application? And lastly, networking. And I think this could be a bit of a scary word for many of us, but if you want to work in museums or even in the art world, I know for a fact that you need to have a bit of networking under your belt. But my biggest piece of advice here is to slowly build up into networking. I think that when we hear, oh, you should be networking to get a job, we instantly think we have to go and meet 500 people for coffees, ask them about their life, get help, have them refer us to jobs, all at once, which, that'd be great. If you're ready to do that, go ahead. But honestly, if you can just take it step by step and slowly improve on your networking skills, it's gonna benefit you across your entire career. It doesn't stop once you get a job. So start small, set basic goals, like maybe just attending an event where there's people there. And then slowly build up to saying, I'll talk to one person, maybe I'll add one person on LinkedIn next time, and then the time after that, I'll meet someone else for coffee afterwards as a follow-up. And you see how you're slowly building onto it. It's not too much at once, and you're slowly building the confidence that you need to really be comfortable networking and to really get the most out of it. Taking this approach really lets you see what you want from networking. Some people just want to learn more about opportunities that exist. Some people want to talk with someone and see what they did and how they can help them. Or maybe they just want to meet people in the industry and have a bit more, working friendship acquaintances in the industry. But where do you even go to network? So I think there's a lot of different things you can do here. First, of course, it'd be nice if there was a networking event in your area for your sector. I know in London, for instance, there's quite a few art world networking events. So if you're at all interested in art museums as a whole, that could be something really useful to go to. There could be different opportunities depending on what your kind of niche is in museums. So for instance, I might go to a data analyst networking event because you never know who knows someone else. But if you're, let's say, in a smaller city or you're just not finding any networking specific opportunities, particularly for the museum sector, I would just think about what kind of events would the person that works in my dream role go to. Maybe it's conferences or events for museums or specific software that museums are using in your area. Maybe it's lectures or concerts or performances. Just think about what kind of events you can go to and potentially find the people that you would want to work with. With these things, usually one door kind of leads to the next. So once you attend one event, you'll learn about something else that's maybe more relevant. So the key bit here is, as I say, just attend one per month. It doesn't have to necessarily be a networking event, but just trying to put yourself more into that world. Slowly. And with that, we've completed your application checklist. So amazing, congrats already. But to close out this video, I just want to take you through my last couple tips. Some of it is a bit of a review, some of it's newer information, but just some final things that I want to leave you with. So first, I think it's important to start thinking about your niche in museums. So I think there's kind of two ways of approaching this. You can either niche yourself into something where you're the absolute expert on that one thing. I think curatorial roles kind of lend themselves to this, where you become an expert on that field of art history. But there's another opportunity for most other jobs, and that's similar to what I did, where you kind of create a niche by combining two different fields. So data and art history became data analyst at an art museum. How many people possess both of those skills? It's much less than the people that possess just an art history degree and are trying to apply to every single museum job. So just something to think about. This doesn't have to be a right now thing, but just over your career, you want to slowly start putting yourself into a niche and making yourself stand out in a certain way. Use education and experience to show your passion for the field, but don't forget the importance of demonstratable skill. So this is usually coming from more project-based work experience, internships, that you can show I have these skills that you're asking for, and I can show you specific examples of what I did in past jobs that will be applicable here. And this is where the advice of maybe working in a different sector where there's less of a barrier to entry, then coming back to museums where you'll be a very strong candidate with that experience. And this might seem a bit hypocritical, but you should also have experience of some sort working in a museum. It does not matter what the job title is or how long ago it even was, but just something you can put on your CV. It really helps with applications, and I think this is something that museums look for when they're hiring. As a plus side, I've also heard of many people that work their way up from these kind of entry-level jobs. They've been security guards and then they end up being managers and kind of executive level roles in a museum. So you could also have that possibility open up for you. And then when you're applying to jobs, remember to identify the kind of core museums that you're interested in working for and setting up notifications and alerts for when they post jobs and reminders to check their website for any new postings. Always keep your LinkedIn and your CV updated even after you get a museum job. I think it's so important to not just forget about these things once you get a job. Always post about things that you've achieved, new projects you've worked on. Really shout about your achievements because this is your career and it could help you eventually get promotions or work in a different museum. Use networking to your advantage. Meet people, talk about the industry, really immerse yourself in the world. This will help you make new connections, of course, but also just start to feel like you are a museum professional. And that is it for today's video. I hope this advice was useful. It's a lot of pieces of advice that I wish I had when I was first applying to museum jobs. But if anything really resonated with you, let me know in the comments. And if there's anything you want me to explore more or talk about more, maybe more information on networking or actually refining your LinkedIn, just let me know in the comments and I'll be happy to post more content. Remember to check out the links below. I have my ebook down there as well as all of my socials so you can see my day-to-day life as a museum professional in London. Thank you all for watching and see you again next week for more Art World Insights.